My name is Valerie Carson. I'm 23 years old, and this should have been the proudest day of my life. Instead, I was watching my father slip something into my champagne flute at my own graduation party. The crystal glass, etched with my university's emblem, sat innocently on the table as he stealthily emptied a small packet of white powder into it. A toast was coming. Decisions had to be made in seconds. So, with the most radiant smile I could muster, I did something that would change our family forever. But before I tell you what I did, you should know this. The choices we make when we're cornered reveal who we truly are. And I'm about to show you who I am. I grew up in what, from the outside, looked like the perfect family. Our house in Westchester County was practically a mansion, with 6 bedrooms, an infinity pool, and gardens tended by a landscaping crew that arrived like clockwork every Thursday morning. My father, Harold Carson, had built his fortune in pharmaceutical development and venture capital, and he never missed an opportunity to remind us how hard he worked to provide for us. What visitors never saw was the emotional deep freeze we lived in behind those perfect walls. My mother left when I was 10, unable to bear my father's controlling nature any longer. My sister Rita was only 6, too young to truly understand what was happening. All she knew was that Mommy was gone, and Daddy said it was because Mommy didn't love us enough to stay. I knew better. I had witnessed the arguments, the manipulation, the slow crushing of my mother's spirit, until she felt she had no choice but to escape. After she left, the difference in how my father treated us became glaring. For me, there were endless expectations, impossible standards, and constant reminders that I needed to be exceptional to be worthy of love. For Rita, there were hugs, affection, and the kind of doting attention that left me both envious and relieved that she was spared my experience. I threw myself into my studies, partly to win his approval, but mostly because academic success was my ticket out. Every honor roll, every academic award, every scholarship offer was another step toward freedom. When I was accepted to Cornell with a partial scholarship, my father seemed more irritated that he had to pay the remainder than proud of my achievement. For 4 years, college was my sanctuary. I could breathe. I made real friends who valued me for who I was, not for what I could achieve. I started dating a man named Thomas, who showed me what healthy love felt like. I even went to therapy, slowly unpacking the damage of growing up with a father who saw his children as extensions of himself rather than as individuals. Throughout those years, my relationship with Rita deteriorated. She had become my father's perfect companion, absorbing his worldview, his judgments, his way of twisting reality. Phone calls home became exercises in restraint as I listened to her parrot his opinions about my life choices. She was 19 now, taking classes at the local community college and living at home, completely under his thumb. What my father and Rita didn't know was that my grandmother, my mother's mother, had secretly set up a trust fund for me, which would become accessible upon my graduation. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to guarantee my independence, a lesson she had whispered to me during her last visit before she passed away when I was 16, telling me it was the most important thing a woman could possess. In the months leading up to my graduation, I noticed my father becoming increasingly concerned about my mental health. He would ask leading questions during our calls, seeming to probe for any sign of anxiety or depression. At first, I dismissed it as genuine concern, until my best friend, Zoe, pointed out the pattern. Zoe was the first to say it out loud. We were in my dorm room 3 weeks before graduation. I was on speakerphone with my father, who had just wrapped up yet another conversation peppered with comments about how the pressure of college can take a toll on fragile minds. After I hung up, Zoe gave me a serious look. "Your dad is setting you up for something, Val. He's trying to build a narrative that you're unstable." I had laughed it off at the time, but a sense of unease lingered. Why would he do that? The pieces started to click into place when I overheard him on the phone during a weekend visit home. He was in his study, the door ajar, talking about significant financial losses and emergency measures. When he saw me in the hall afterward, his face wore that manufactured smile that never reached his eyes. "The markets have been volatile, Valerie, but nothing for you to worry about. Just focus on finishing strong. When I mentioned that Thomas would be at graduation, but might miss the party due to a work emergency, my father seemed relieved. One less witness, I would later realize. 2 days before my graduation, I was in my childhood bedroom packing when I heard Rita and my father in his office. Their voices were low, but one sentence from my father carried clearly. She's always been emotionally fragile, even as a child. You may need to testify to that. The graduation ceremony itself was beautiful. Thomas was there, along with Zoe and her parents, who had practically adopted me during college holidays when I couldn't face going home. My father attended with Rita, both impeccably dressed, both playing the part of proud family members to perfection. If you didn't know to look for it, you wouldn't notice how every compliment from my father was laced with a subtle put-down. What an accomplishment, especially considering your struggles with test anxiety. I'd never had test anxiety. We're so proud you made it through. Through what, exactly? These little seeds, planted for anyone listening, were creating a picture of me as something less capable, less stable than my achievements suggested. That evening, Thomas had to leave for his work emergency, apologetic but sure he could make it to the party the next day. I kissed him goodbye, already feeling the armor I'd built in college begin to crack as I faced a full day at home before the celebration. "Your dad gives me the creeps," he admitted as he left. "Call me if anything feels off, okay?" I should have heeded that warning more closely. The graduation party my father threw was extravagant to the point of absurdity. Our already luxurious backyard had been transformed with white tents, professional lighting, a string quartet, and catering from a restaurant that usually had a 3-month waiting list. About 100 guests milled about, many of whom I barely knew, holding flutes of expensive champagne, all supposedly to celebrate my achievement. Looking around, I recognized my father's business partners, old family friends, a few relatives, and a handful of my real friends, including Zoe. Thomas had texted to say he was running late, but would be there before the toast. The guest list felt curated for an audience, not a genuine celebration. Across the lawn, I watched my father work the crowd. He was in his element, charming and charismatic, the successful businessman and proud father. To those who didn't know him intimately, he was perfect. I had learned long ago that his public and private personas were entirely different creatures. What struck me as unusual was Rita's behavior. Normally at family events, she'd be off with her friends or on her phone. Today, she stuck close to our father, occasionally shooting strange little smiles in my direction. She wore a baby blue dress that matched her blonde hair, looking every bit the innocent younger sister. But there was a calculated look in her eyes that unsettled me. As I accepted congratulations from guests, I noticed Milton Friedman, my father's longtime lawyer, carrying a briefcase. He gave me a curt nod before making his way to my father. They spoke briefly, and Milton showed him something in the briefcase before my father ushered him into the house. I made a mental note to find out what that was about. Jackson Cooper, one of my father's business partners, approached me with a glass of water in his hand. He seemed uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he gave me the standard congratulations. "I always thought you were the smart one, Valerie," he said in a low voice. "Be careful with any papers they ask you to sign today." Before I could ask what he meant, he was called away by another guest. The warning landed like a stone in my stomach. My father's current girlfriend, Diane, cornered me near the dessert table. She was closer to my age than his, which was his preference. But unlike previous girlfriends, she seemed to possess a sharp intelligence and an awareness of her surroundings. "Your father's been so stressed lately," she said, her eyes flickering to make sure he wasn't nearby. "There have been some financial problems with the company." "Serious?" I asked. "What kind of problems?" She shook her head. "I've probably said too much already. Just be aware." As she drifted away, I spotted Dr. Patrick Nelson, my father's college friend and now a renowned psychiatrist, talking with him near the bar. The two of them glanced in my direction and continued speaking in low tones. My unease grew. Waitstaff were arranging champagne flutes on a special table for the toast. I noticed one was different. etched with my university's crest and a tiny graduation cap. The headwaiter placed it carefully at the front with a small, reserved placard. Zoe appeared at my side, chic in a simple black dress, her dark curls framing a face full of concern. "Something is off about all this, Val," she whispered. "Your dad keeps having these little side conversations, and Rita is acting weird, even for Rita." "I know," I replied. "I feel like I'm walking into something, but I can't figure out what." Memories of past family events flashed through my mind. My 18th birthday, when my father invited my high school boyfriend, only to spend the evening telling embarrassing stories that were mostly fabricated. My high school graduation, where he gave a speech emphasizing how worried we'd all been that I wouldn't make it. Always these subtle public attempts to undermine me, to create a version of me that didn't match reality. As the afternoon wore on, the champagne toast was announced for 6 o'clock. I checked my phone. Thomas was still an hour away, stuck in traffic. I would be facing whatever this was without him. I was chatting with one of my old professors when I overheard my father talking to a family friend. "Valerie's always been so emotionally fragile," he was saying, his voice just loud enough for me to hear. "The pressure of college was almost too much for her. We're worried about her transition into the real world." The friend made sympathetic noises as I stood frozen, my back to them, listening. "That's why this celebration is so important," he continued. "A positive experience before she faces the challenges ahead." Throughout the party, Rita had shadowed our father, occasionally running errands for him, fetching him drinks or finding people he wanted to speak with. They seemed to be operating as a unit, and the looks that passed between them felt charged with meaning. Whatever was happening, was Rita a willing accomplice, or was she just being used as a pawn? As the time for the toast drew near, servers began ushering guests toward the main tent. The special champagne flute had been moved to a small table near the front, where I would presumably stand with my father during the toast. My sense of dread was intensifying by the minute. Dr. Nelson approached me, all smiles and congratulations, but his eyes were assessing me with a clinical professionalism that sent a chill down my spine. "Your father tells me you've been under considerable stress," he said casually. "Graduation can be a triggering time for many young people." "Actually, I've never felt better," I replied firmly. "Graduation feels like a beginning, not an end." He nodded, a patronizing smile on his lips. "Of course. Still, transitions can be difficult. If you ever need someone to talk to, professionally, I mean, your father has already arranged to cover any sessions." I thanked him coolly and moved away, my mind racing. Why would my father prearrange therapy sessions with a friend? The pieces were beginning to form a disturbing picture, but I still couldn't see the whole image. The moment for the champagne toast arrived with the chime of a small silver bell. The chatter died down as guests gathered under the main tent. My father stood at the front, Rita just behind him, both of them beaming. Waiters finished arranging the last glasses on trays, with my special flute displayed prominently on a small, separate server. "Ladies and gentlemen," my father began, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. "Today we celebrate a milestone for our family. My daughter, Valerie, has completed her studies at Cornell University." Polite applause followed, and I forced a smile, scanning the crowd for Zoe. She was standing near the back, a worried expression on her face. "As a father, it's a unique joy to watch both of my daughters become the women they are meant to be," he continued. Rita, pursuing her own path close to home, and Valerie, who has always forged her own independent path, sometimes a little too independent for her own good. There it was again, the compliment wrapped in a subtle critique. I held my smile, but it took everything I had. Before we toast to Valerie's achievement and her future, I want to take a moment to thank all of you for supporting our family through our various challenges over the years. What challenges? A prickle of my earlier irritation gave way to genuine alarm. Waiters began to move through the crowd, distributing champagne. I watched the head waiter pick up the special tray, holding my own decorated glass. My father gestured for me to join him at the front. As I made my way toward him, I glanced back at the champagne table. And that's when I saw it. My father had stepped back for a moment, ostensibly to speak with one of the waiters. Rita stood nearby, partially blocking the view for most of the guests. With a swift, practiced motion, I watched my father pull a small packet from his jacket pocket, tear it open, and empty a white powder into the special champagne flute. The movement was fluid, almost professional in its economy. Time seemed to slow. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. But on the outside, I maintained my composure, continuing my walk with a pleasant expression fixed on my face. Years of masking my true feelings in my father's presence were serving me well. The waiter picked up the doctored glass and started toward me. In those few seconds, my mind raced with possibilities. What was in the powder? Why would he do this? What was the end game? Snippets of conversations I'd overheard suddenly coalesced into a terrifying possibility. I reached the front and stood beside my father, who draped an arm around my shoulders in a show of paternal pride. The waiter approached, the special glass on his tray. I had to think fast. With a casual shift, I moved a little closer to Rita, who had stepped forward to join the family moment as the waiter extended the tray to me. I smiled, took the glass, and in one smooth motion, turned to her. "Dad and I can't thank you enough for all your help with this wonderful party," I said warmly, holding the glass out to her. "I think you deserve this special glass for being such an amazing sister." Confusion flickered across her face, but with our father and 100 guests watching, social pressure did its work. She accepted the glass with a slightly baffled smile. "Oh, I couldn't," she began, but I had already plucked a plain flute of champagne from another passing waiter. "I insist," I said, leaving no room for argument. Our father was frozen, a strange series of emotions flitting across his face. Alarm, calculation, and then a forced recovery as he realized he couldn't object without drawing attention. "To achievements and new beginnings," he said, raising his glass, his voice only slightly strained. Everyone echoed the toast. I feigned a sip from my own champagne, watching over the rim as Rita, ever eager to please our father, took a deep drink from the special glass, draining nearly half of it in one go. For a moment, nothing happened. The toast ended. Guests applauded, and conversation resumed. My father leaned in to whisper in my ear, "Why did you do that?" His voice was a low snarl, taut with barely controlled rage. "Do what?" I replied innocently. "I just thought it would be nice to include Rita in the moment." Before he could answer, I moved away, circulating among the guests, keeping Rita in my peripheral vision. Within 15 minutes, I noticed the change. She was talking to one of our cousins when she suddenly put a hand to her forehead, blinking rapidly. She took a faltering step, then another. The cousin reached out a hand to steady her. Across the tent, my father saw it too. I saw the moment comprehension hit him, the color draining from his face. He moved quickly toward Rita, but not before she spoke, her voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "I feel so strange. Everything is spinning." My father reached her side, wrapping an arm around her waist in support, his face a mask of fatherly concern. But when his eyes met mine across the room, they burned with accusation and something else, something that looked almost like fear. As Rita grew more disoriented, the guests began to notice. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I stood my ground, watching it all unfold, torn between a grim sense of victory and a genuine pang of concern for my sister. Whatever my father had put in that drink was meant for me, but Rita was the one paying the price. I didn't know his exact plan yet, but seeing his panic confirmed my darkest suspicions. Something very wrong had been averted, even as something equally wrong was now playing out before us. Rita's condition deteriorated quickly. Her speech became slurred, her movements uncoordinated. I watched my father guide her toward the house, his expression a performance of paternal worry, though I could see the tension in his shoulders. Guests parted to let them pass, murmuring sympathetically. "I think she's had a bit too much to drink," someone said. "Poor thing, probably just excited for her sister," another added. I followed them into the house, along with Zoe, who had pushed through the crowd to reach me. "What happened?" she whispered. "I'll explain later," I said. "Just stay close." In the kitchen, my father had settled Rita on a bar stool. She was swaying dangerously, her eyes unfocused. When she saw me enter, she gave a lopsided grin. "See?" she slurred. "I don't feel so good." My father turned on me, his fury barely contained beneath the veneer of concern. "What did you do?" he hissed. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low but firm. "You were going to drug me, weren't you? I saw you put something in my champagne glass, the one I gave to Rita." For a moment he didn't answer, his mind calculating his next move. "It was just something to help you relax," he finally said, his voice barely a whisper. "You've been so on edge lately. I was worried you might have an episode during the party." "An episode?" I repeated flatly. "I've never had an episode in my life." We were interrupted by a crash as Rita suddenly slumped sideways, knocking over a vase of flowers. Water and lilies spilled across the marble countertop as my father lunged to catch her before she fell off the stool. The commotion drew several guests into the kitchen, including, blessedly, Dr. Nelson. Whatever his involvement in my father's plans, his medical ethics apparently extended to treating a person who was clearly unwell. "Let me see her," he said, his demeanor all business. He checked Rita's pupils, her pulse, her responsiveness, his expression growing more concerned by the second. "Has she taken anything? Any medication, drugs, alcohol besides the champagne?" he asked. "No," my father answered quickly. "Just the champagne. She hardly ever drinks. Perhaps it just hit her hard." Dr. Nelson frowned. "This doesn't look like a reaction to alcohol." He turned to the gathering crowd. "Is anyone else feeling unwell?" The guests looked at one another, shaking their heads. No one else reported symptoms. "I think we should call an ambulance," Dr. Nelson said firmly. "Her vitals are concerning me." As someone went to make the call, my father pulled me aside, his fingers digging painfully into my arm. "This is your fault," he whispered, furious. "If anything happens to her—" "What was in that drink, Dad?" I interrupted, meeting his gaze squarely. "What exactly was I supposed to drink?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "It was just a mild sedative, completely harmless. I was trying to help you." "Help me how?" Before he could answer, Rita began to have a small seizure, her body twitching on the stool. Dr. Nelson barked orders for people to give her space, for someone to time the seizure. My father rushed to her side, genuine fear now stark on his face. The next 30 minutes were a blur of paramedics, worried questions, and my father's increasingly frantic attempts to control the situation. I overheard Dr. Nelson speaking quietly to one of the EMTs. "It looks like some kind of benzodiazepine reaction, possibly combined with alcohol. Any idea how much she took?" In the chaos, with all eyes on Rita and the arriving ambulance, I slipped away to my father's office. Years of living in his house had taught me how to move silently, where the creaky floorboards were, which hinges needed oil. I had exactly 7 minutes while the paramedics stabilized Rita for transport. His desk was locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key, taped to the underside of the center drawer, a hiding spot he thought was clever. Inside, I found a folder with my name on it. My hands trembled as I quickly leafed through the contents. Psychiatric evaluation forms, partially filled out by Dr. Nelson. Statements about my history of emotional instability, none of which were true. Legal documents for an emergency guardianship due to mental incapacitation. Financial records showing massive losses in my father's company over the last year. The bank statement for my grandmother's trust fund, which he wasn't supposed to have access to. And, most damning of all, a drafted affidavit in Rita's name, detailing my supposed history of emotional outbursts, paranoia, and instability. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening clarity. My father was financially desperate. My trust fund represented a significant sum of money he couldn't touch, unless I was deemed incapable of managing my own affairs. The plan, it seemed, was to drug me at my own graduation party, have me exhibit disturbing behavior in front of dozens of witnesses, including a conveniently present psychiatrist friend, and then use the incident to support an emergency petition for guardianship. I heard the front door open and voices in the foyer. Quickly, I used my phone to photograph the most important documents, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. On second thought, I grabbed a small, blank notepad from his desk and slipped it into my pocket. When I returned to the main hall, the paramedics were wheeling Rita out on a gurney. My father stood nearby, looking both worried and furious. When he saw me, his expression darkened further. "I'm riding with her in the ambulance," he announced to the room. "Valerie, you stay here and see to our guests." I stepped forward. "Actually, I think I should go too. She's my sister." "You've done enough," he bit out. "Stay here." Zoe appeared at my side. "I'll drive you to the hospital," she whispered. "Let him go in the ambulance." I nodded, watching as my father climbed into the ambulance with Rita. As it pulled away, sirens silent for now, the guests began to disperse, the party effectively over. Zoe pulled me toward her car. "What the hell was that back there?" she demanded once we were alone. I showed her the photos I'd taken of the documents. As she scrolled through them, her eyes widened. "Oh my God, Val, he was going to have you declared incompetent." "It wasn't just about the money," I said, my mind still reeling. "It was about control. He was losing the company and losing his grip on me at the same time. I don't think he could handle it." I forwarded the photos to Thomas with a brief explanation, then texted Milton Friedman's assistant, Sophia, whom I'd met several times and who had always seemed uncomfortable around my father, *. "Need to speak with you urgently about documents prepared for my father. It's a security matter. Can you meet me at Memorial Hospital?" Her reply was swift. *. "On my way. 30 minutes. 3rd floor cafeteria." As Zoe drove us to the hospital, I felt strangely calm. The constant, low-level anxiety that had been my companion for years, the second-guessing of my own perceptions when they conflicted with my father's version of reality, was gone. In its place was a cold clarity. For the first time, I had irrefutable proof of his manipulation. The fact that he was willing to drug me confirmed every suppressed instinct I'd ever had. "I just can't believe Rita was a part of it," I said, staring out the window. Zoe glanced at me. "Are you sure she knew what was happening? That affidavit could have been prepared without her knowledge." I thought about Rita's behavior at the party, her awkward smiles, her hovering near our father. But I also remembered her confusion when I handed her the glass, and our father's genuine panic when she started showing symptoms. "Maybe she didn't know the whole plan," I conceded. "Maybe she was just following his lead like she always does, like she was trained to do." "Conditioned," Zoe corrected. "Your father has been conditioning you both your entire lives. The difference is, you got away to college." Just as we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I got a text from Thomas. "I'm on my way. Don't sign anything. Don't be alone with your father." For the first time since I saw that powder fall into my champagne, I felt tears sting my eyes. To have someone believe me, without question, felt like oxygen after years of being suffocated. The hospital waiting room was a study in tension. My father sat stiffly in a chair near the nurse's station, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in a low, urgent tone. When he saw Zoe and me walk in, he ended the call abruptly and stood up. "I told you to stay home," he said, his voice controlled but simmering with rage. "I wanted to be here for Rita," I replied calmly. "How is she?" "They're running tests," he said, his gaze fixed on Zoe. "This is a family matter. Your friend should leave." "I'm staying," Zoe said firmly, crossing her arms. Before my father could retort, a doctor emerged from the treatment room, looking for Ritter's family. We both approached her. "Miss Carson is stable for now," the doctor explained. "We've administered activated charcoal and a counteragent for what appears to be a benzodiazepine, likely mixed with alcohol. The full blood work is still processing, but initial results confirm a significant amount of sedative in her system." My father's expression was grim. "She doesn't usually drink. The champagne must have hit her hard." The doctor's brow furrowed slightly. "Mr. Carson, the level of sedative we're detecting is inconsistent with the standard prescription. It was a substantial dose. Do you have any idea how your daughter might have obtained this medication?" My father's expression remained a mask of worried perplexity. "No, of course not." He turned to me, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Unless Valerie Ritter mentioned taking something of yours." The implication was clear. He was already beginning to shift the blame. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "The only thing Ritter had at the party was champagne from the special glass, the one that was meant for me." The doctor glanced between us, sensing the undercurrent of tension. "Mr. Carson, we are required to report suspected cases of intentional drugging. The police may want to speak with you and your family." "Of course," my father said smoothly. "We want to get to the bottom of this as well. When can we see Ritter?" "She's awake, but groggy. One visitor at a time, please." My father immediately headed for the treatment area, casting a warning look at me over his shoulder. I let him go, knowing it would give me time to meet with Milton's assistant. Zoe and I found Sophia in the cafeteria, nervously stirring a cup of coffee. She was young, maybe 25, with intelligent eyes and a perpetually worried expression that seemed to have deepened since I'd last seen her. "Thank you for meeting me," I said, sliding into the chair opposite her. She glanced around, anxious. "I could lose my job for this." "I know, and I appreciate it, but I think you already know something is wrong." She nodded slightly. "The guardianship papers, they don't seem right. Mr. Friedman was uneasy about them too, but your father is a major client." I showed her the photos I'd taken. Her face paled as she scrolled through them. "There's more," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "Your father has been moving money between accounts, using company funds to cover personal losses. Mr. Friedman advised against it, but he did it anyway. I saw the transfers." "Do you have proof?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I made copies. After the second time, when Mr. Friedman seemed too scared to confront your father directly, I thought I might need them someday, if things went bad." "Things have definitely gone bad," I said, my voice dark. "My father just drugged my sister with a dose meant for me, all to seize control of my trust fund and cover his financial mess." Sophia opened her purse and handed me a flash drive. "It's all here. The transfers, the emails where Mr. Friedman warned him it was illegal, the backdated documents." As we were talking, a nurse approached our table. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Are you Valerie Carson?" she asked quietly. I nodded, a knot of apprehension tightening in my stomach. "Your sister is asking for you. She seems quite distressed, and it might be best if you come now. Your father stepped out to take a call." I excused myself from Sophia, promising to protect her identity, and followed the nurse. As we walked, she spoke in a low voice. "The full blood toxicology came back. Your sister had a dangerously high dose of the sedative in her system, far higher than would ever be prescribed. Combined with the alcohol, it could have been fatal." My stomach churned. "Thank you for telling me." She gave me a meaningful look. "I've been a nurse for 20 years. I know what an intentional drugging looks like. Your sister keeps saying the drink was meant for you. Is that true?" I met her gaze evenly. "Yes." She nodded once, her mouth a grim line. "I'll make sure that's noted in her chart. The police will want to see it." Ritter was in a private room, looking small and pale against the stark white sheets. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Val," she whispered, "I'm so sorry." I went to her bedside and took her hand. "It's okay. How are you feeling?" "Weird. Blurry." She blinked rapidly, struggling to focus. "Dad is so angry. He said you switched the glasses on purpose." "I did," I admitted. "I saw him put something in my glass, the special one with my university crest on it." Confusion clouded her features. "But he told me it was just something to help you relax at the party. He said you'd been having anxiety attacks at school." I shook my head. "Ritter, I've never had an anxiety attack. He lied to you." She frowned, trying to process it through the lingering haze of the drugs. "But then, Why would he? Her voice trailed off as a memory seemed to surface. Dad said it would just make you sleepy while you signed the papers. What did he mean, Val? I squeezed her hand gently. He wants control of my trust fund, the one Grandma left me, which I can access now that I've graduated. He was going to have me declared mentally incompetent, and he needed me to behave erratically in front of witnesses. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know it was that serious. He just said you needed help managing things while you adjusted to life after college. I believed her. Ritter had always been manipulated by our father, pitted against me in ways she was too young to understand. The affidavit I'd found was in her name, but I doubted she'd ever seen the final version or grasped its implications. I know, I said softly. It's not your fault. I used my phone to snap a picture of her hospital bracelet and the visible portion of her chart hanging at the foot of the bed. Evidence. Our conversation was cut short by my father's return. His face hardened when he saw me sitting with Ritter. I thought I made it clear this wasn't a good time for visitors, he said, his voice taut. The nurse said Ritter was asking for me. Well, she needs to rest now. He turned to Ritter with an exaggerated display of concern. The doctor said you're going to be fine, sweetheart. Just a bad reaction. These things happen. The nurse who had brought me appeared in the doorway. Actually, Mr. Carson, the doctor would like to speak with you about the full toxicology report, and there are 2 police officers here with some questions. My father's face remained serene, but I saw a flicker of tension around his eyes, an almost imperceptible straightening of his shoulders as he prepared for battle. Of course, he said smoothly. I'll be right there. He turned to me. Valerie, perhaps you should go home and rest. It's been a long day for everyone. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command, delivered with the expectation of obedience that had defined our relationship for 23 years. But something had fundamentally shifted when I saw him drop that powder into my glass. The fear that had always made me capitulate was gone. Actually, I think I'll stay with Ritter a little longer, I replied calmly. She seems to need me right now. His eyes flashed with rage, but with the nurse watching, he could only give a stiff nod before following her out. As soon as he was gone, I turned back to Ritter. Listen carefully. Dad is in serious financial trouble. He was going to use me to get access to Grandma's trust fund. I have proof. I'm going to have to talk to the police, and things are going to get complicated. She clutched my hand, her eyes wide with fear. What should I do? Tell the truth. No matter what he told you, what you thought you saw, just tell the absolute truth. Heavy footsteps approached the room, and a hospital security guard appeared at the door. Miss Carson, your father has requested that you leave the premises. He says you're upsetting your sister. Ritter started to protest, but I squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's okay. I'll be back. As the guard escorted me out, I saw my father speaking with 2 police officers near the nurses' station. His posture was confident, his expression appropriately concerned. He was in complete control, shaping the narrative as he always had. Outside the hospital, I found Zoe waiting anxiously by the car. Thomas had arrived as well, his face tense with worry. I fell into his arms, finally allowing myself a moment of vulnerability. It's worse than we thought, I told them, laying out the new evidence I had gathered. We need help. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of activity. Thomas had a friend from law school, Derek Williams, who specialized in financial fraud and elder abuse cases. While I wasn't an elder, the principles of guardianship applied. We met in Derek's small office on Sunday morning, laying out everything we had. First, we need to secure your trust fund, Derek said, poring over the documents. If your father has already filed for an emergency guardianship, we need to contest it immediately. He was supposed to file it Monday morning according to the paperwork, I explained. The party, and I assume my erratic behavior after being drugged, was supposed to be the precipitating event. Derek nodded, his expression thoughtful. Then we have a small window. Good. Now we need to expand our evidence base. These financial documents from Sophia are damning, but we need more. We spent hours strategizing. Derek placed a call to the hospital, securing copies of Ritter's medical records with her verbal consent, which she provided during a carefully timed call while my father was meeting with his own lawyer. Thomas reached out to Jackson Cooper, my father's business partner, who agreed to meet with us privately. The meeting with Jackson revealed even more than we'd hoped. My father's company wasn't just struggling, it was essentially bankrupt, kept afloat only through creative accounting and the misappropriation of investor funds. Jackson had been trying to extricate himself from the partnership for months, but my father had been stonewalling him. Harold has always been controlling, but this past year he's become desperate, Jackson explained. When he learned your trust fund was maturing, he fixated on it as the solution to all his problems. Ritter was discharged from the hospital on Sunday evening. My father took her straight home and, according to a text she managed to send me, confiscated her phone soon after. But the message was clear. Dad's telling everyone you've been unstable for years and tried to blame him for what happened to me. Don't come home alone. By Monday morning, we were ready. Derek had filed a preemptive injunction, blocking any attempt at guardianship. The police had opened an investigation into the drugging incident, with the hospital records providing clear evidence. Sophia had given a statement about the financial misconduct. Jackson had provided documentation of business malfeasance. The final confrontation happened at my father's house, on my terms. I arrived with Derek, Thomas, Zoe, and a police detective assigned to the case. My father opened the door, his face a mask of paternal concern that quickly shifted to wariness when he saw my companions. "Valerie, I was so worried about you," he began, his voice perfectly modulated to convey loving concern. "After what happened at the party, I thought you might be having another one of your episodes." I noted his emphasis on another asterisk, continuing to build his fictional narrative. Even now, behind him, I could see Ritter hovering in the hall, her face pale and uncertain. "I'd like to speak with you in your study, Dad," I said calmly. "We have some things to discuss." His eyes swept over the group, calculating. "Now isn't a good time. Perhaps later, when it's just family." The detective stepped forward, flashing his badge. "Mr. Carson, I'm Detective Rodriguez. I'm investigating the incident involving your daughter Ritter's hospitalization. I'd like to ask you a few questions as well." My father's facade cracked, just for a second, a flicker of unease crossing his face before he recovered. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Please come in." We moved to his study, the very room where so many of his manipulations had been masterminded. I watched him assess the situation, trying to gauge how much I knew, how much evidence I had. I sat in the chair opposite his desk, deliberately taking the position of power where his guests usually sat. He remained standing, unwilling to cede the psychological advantage of height. "Valerie has been under a tremendous amount of stress," he began, addressing the detective. "Her behavior has become increasingly erratic." I took out my phone and placed it on the desk between us. "Actually, I'd like to play something for everyone first." I pressed play on the recording I'd made in Ritter's hospital room. Her groggy voice filled the silence. "Dad said it would just make you sleepy while you signed the papers. What did he mean, Val?" Asterisk. My father's face hardened as the recording continued, capturing his return and the nurse's mention of the police's questions about the toxicology report. "You recorded a private conversation," he said, his voice dangerously low. "That's illegal." "Actually, in this state, one-party consent is perfectly legal," Derek interjected. "Valerie was a party to the conversation and consented to the recording." I placed the flash drive Sophia had given me on the table, right next to my phone. Beside it, I added printouts of the documents I'd photographed in his office. "Financial fraud," the detective stated plainly. "Attempted guardianship fraud, drugging you with the intent to manipulate you into signing over your legal rights. Shall I continue?" "This is absurd," my father stammered, though I could see the calculation in his eyes, the mental assessment of his narrowing options. "You've always been prone to dramatic interpretations, Valerie. It's precisely this kind of paranoid thinking that concerns me." The office door opened and Rita walked in, ignoring our father's piercing glare. "Stop it, Dad," she said, her voice low but firm. "I know what you did. I know what you told me about Val wasn't true." My father's expression shifted, becoming persuasive. "Rita, darling, you're still recovering. You're confused about what happened." "I'm not confused about the statement you wanted me to sign," she shot back. "The one that said Val had all these emotional problems she's never had. I found it on your desk this morning." For the first time, I saw genuine fear in my father's eyes. His carefully constructed narrative was crumbling from all sides. Just as the detective began to formally question my father about the drugging incident, the door opened again. Jackson Cooper entered, followed by Diane, my father's girlfriend. Both were carrying briefcases. "I hope we're not too late," Jackson said grimly. "We have the financial records you requested, Detective." My father stared at Diane, betrayal etched across his face. "You too?" She met his gaze unflinchingly. "What you did was beyond the pale, Harold. Drugging your own daughter? I can't be a part of that." The next few hours were a blur of statements, documents, and my father's increasingly desperate denials. As the evidence mounted, his composure unraveled. By the time the detective informed him he was being taken in for questioning, with charges likely to follow, he had resorted to threats. "You'll regret this," he said, looking directly at me as officers prepared to escort him out. "I gave you everything. Is this how you repay me?" "You gave me fear and manipulation," I replied softly. "I'm giving myself freedom." After he was gone, Rita and I sat alone in the living room, the house strangely silent, without our father's domineering presence. For the first time in years, maybe ever, we talked honestly. "I believed him," she said, tears streaming down her face, "about everything. That Mom left because she didn't love us, that you were unstable and needed his guidance, that I was the good daughter for staying close to home." "I know," I said, taking her hand. "That's what he wanted. He needed to keep us apart so we couldn't compare notes, see the holes in his stories." "He told me you were jealous of me," she continued, "that you resented me for being his favorite." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "He told me the same thing about you, that you resented me for being smarter, for getting away to college." We both fell silent, processing the years of manipulation, the carefully engineered rivalry that had kept us from being true sisters, from being allies against his control. "What happens now?" she finally asked. I squeezed her hand. "Now, we get to decide for ourselves. Together." 3 months after my graduation party, I was settling into my new apartment in the city. It was modest compared to my father's mansion, but it was mine, paid for with a portion of my trust fund, which I was learning to manage responsibly. The rest was securely invested, providing a small monthly stipend that allowed me to find the right job with care, rather than grabbing the first one available. Rita had moved in with me temporarily while she figured out her next steps. After years of our father controlling her education and ambitions, limiting her to the local community college where he could monitor her, she was exploring her own interests for the first time. She'd enrolled in a photography course and was considering transferring to a 4-year university in the fall. Our father was facing multiple charges, including financial fraud, attempted guardianship abuse, and drug distribution with intent to commit fraud. His business had completely collapsed when investors learned of the embezzled funds. The mansion was in foreclosure. His fall from grace was swift and absolute. Both Rita and I were in therapy, separately and occasionally together, processing the years of manipulation and emotional abuse. It was painful work, untangling the ways we had been pitted against each other, the false narratives we'd internalized, and the defense mechanisms we'd built to survive in our father's house. "I still get angry sometimes," Rita admitted one evening as we shared takeout on my small balcony, "not just at Dad, but at myself for believing him for so long." I felt that, understanding completely. It's hard not to be angry at ourselves, but we were kids when it started. We did what we had to do to survive in that environment. Thomas and Zoe remained constant pillars of support in our recovery. Thomas and I were taking our relationship slowly, both aware that I needed space to figure out who I was outside of my father's influence. Zoe had become like a sister to Rita as well, and the three of us formed a tight-knit unit of mutual support. I found an unexpected purpose in my experience, volunteering with an organization that helped young adults navigate family estrangement and financial independence. The skills I'd developed surviving my father's manipulation proved valuable in helping others recognize and escape similar situations. "You know what I realized the other day?" Rita said, putting down her chopsticks. "I never actually knew what I wanted. Every decision I made was either to please Dad or to react against what he wanted. Even the things I thought I liked, tennis, business classes, they were his interests that I adopted." "I felt the same way," I admitted. "College helped me start to figure it out, but I still catch myself sometimes making choices based on what would keep me safe from his criticism rather than what I truly desire." We were learning that recovery wasn't linear. Some days were easier than others, some memories were harder to process, but we were moving forward, together, creating a new kind of family built on honesty and mutual support instead of fear and manipulation. The trust fund my father had so desperately wanted to control had become a source of healing, not division. We used a portion of it to pay for therapy for both of us. Rita and I agreed that once she decided on a university, her education would be covered by it as well. Our grandmother would have wanted that. Perhaps the most profound change was in how I saw myself. For years, I had questioned my own perceptions whenever they conflicted with my father's version of reality, a common reaction to gaslighting and manipulation. The constant anxiety, the self-doubt, the need for external validation had been so ingrained that at first I barely recognized its absence. The freedom to trust my own judgment, to make decisions without fear of retaliation or manipulation, was both exhilarating and terrifying. There were days I missed the clear, if toxic, structure my father had provided. But those days grew rarer as I built my own foundation. Rita struggled similarly, often calling me in a panic when faced with decisions our father once would have made for her. Together, we were learning to be the authors of our own stories, rather than characters in his. What I want you to take from my story is this: manipulation and control can look like love and protection. The people who hurt us most are often the ones who claim to care the most. But your perceptions matter, your feelings are valid, and it is never too late to reclaim your own narrative. The glass of champagne that was meant to trap me became the catalyst for my freedom. Sometimes the most important choice we make is to trust ourselves, even when everyone around us tells us not to. Rita and I are still at the beginning of our journey toward true independence and a healthy relationship. There are hard days and setbacks. There are moments we slip back into old patterns, but we move forward with honesty and compassion for each other and for ourselves. Have you ever had to make a split-second decision that changed everything? Or have you suffered from family manipulation that took years to recognize? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about breaking free from toxic relationships and finding your authentic self. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share this with them. Sometimes, just knowing we are not alone in our experiences is the first step toward healing. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you deserve to be the author of your own life.